Wait, am I doing it again? What's happening? Am I the monster now? Is that what's going on? Reach chapter 0. Okay, woo. Man. Okay, first time really playing it's called stealth horror. So it's really intense. I don't know if this is my my kind of game. It's a little bit too intense on the anxiety. But yeah, let's just get my thoughts about this this game in general. So you were a person who was sent to the moon in order to stop the ASN, the security system with the robots. But then when you were doing it, you discovered that something else was going on outside of the security issue, and that there were species living on the moon. And so you investigate that. And the things that are happening on the moon seem to be threefold. One, there seems to be some kind of fungus. Two, there seems to be this entity called Type A. And three, there seems to be this entity called Type B. The Type B enemy was, or enemy entity was found at the apple tree and hilariously choked on an apple and died. And I think that was the mother of the Type A beings. And the reason why the Type A beings were so concerned with being in the spaceship, because, you know, they could have gone anywhere. They could have just stayed outside of the spaceship, or not spaceship, the lunar base. But they went inside constantly. They were looking. And they even showed some intelligence at the end, which is not something I expected from them. Or some emotional intelligence, at least. So yeah, they were just looking for their mom, basically. Now, it is a bit unclear to me how the fungus relates to those Type A and B beings. Do the fungus create these beings? Are they just a separate issue? In any case, there were two big threats outside of the security system. And that's the fungus and the Type A beings. And I don't think they change into Type A beings, because it makes no sense. There are no people on the moon outside of the lunar base, so it will be... Yeah, it's just such great. Okay. So it would make no sense that the fungus needs some kind of humans or something to transform into Type A beings. So I think the fungus is just a separate thing, and the Type A beings were there always. But they, you know, you come to a new planet, there are new kind of viruses, fungus, whatever. So you're probably gonna get infected with something that your body hasn't been prepared for, and that situation was the fungus. So the fungus and the Type A being were separate, two separate things, two separate threats, so to say. And yeah, so that's, I think, story-wise. In the end, what happens is, I think what was also shown is that you open the canal, you go inside, and in the end, you become part of the fungal ecosystem that is there. So unfortunately, it's a really bad ending for you as a player. And I think what they meant with chapter 1 is that someone else is being sent there to check what's going on. And then that will be a new person, and then that person will likely also succumb to the fungus. So there's this kind of cyclus, or cycly, that they have in the story, which is kind of cool that they have that. Yeah, so the game, you can kind of put it into two parts. The one is with the security system, the other part is with the canal and the monsters. To me, the first part was very doable in a lot of different ways. First of all, it wasn't as scary as the later parts. It was still kind of scary, something following you, but you know it was a robot, you could see the robot. It had its limits. You can even stun them. I don't know how you disabled them, but I was able to disable one of them. And so the threat was just severely less. And then I also felt like the mazes weren't as severe and as extensive as the other parts. There were also not a lot of very dark parts from what I remember, so that also kind of helps. The second part, now first of all, yes, it was a very more scarier part than the first part. I think for me it was definitely the scariest part of any game I've played. I've not had experience with a lot of horror games yet, outside of Resident Evil maybe. But it was definitely more scary, but it also got a bit more annoying. There were the mazes, they were huge or pretty big, and you had like these different things at the same time. So you had the maze, you had the monster, and sometimes it was dark, and then sometimes you had to solve a puzzle in the meantime. And trying to juggle all those different things just become a little bit of a frustration. And at some point in the last stream, I was just like, okay, I don't feel like running around like a headless chicken trying to walk into the right things accidentally while that monster kills me 10 times. So let me just check out the code online. But then they randomized the code, so I couldn't, which I really don't understand. You know, if people don't want to play part of the game, or want to look up something online, I think they should just tell the code. It would made it more fun for me. But inherently, that's kind of a game design issue to me. It could just be me though. I don't know. I haven't really looked for any reviews or any other than just the Metacritic score. But yeah, that was pretty frustrating. Also, the breakers, the electricity breakers that you had to go to every time, they were at very specific places. The doors were at very specific places. You had to open certain doors to get to the destination that you wanted to go to. All in all, there was a lot of searching. Basically mindless searching for a lot of times. You can memorize all that stuff, and maybe some people are really good at memorizing where everything is, but you know, I think I'm just a casual player, but in this sense I'm not a hardcore horror fan, a hardcore puzzle fan. But pretty hard to find overall. Also, especially with someone chasing you, you have to keep your head cool. There's some challenge in that, but they overdid it. I feel like they made it too severe. Immediately after I got some things and I was able to be like, okay, I don't want to go through all these things, just give me the code. Like with the laboratory, with the different chemicals that I needed to have. I was like, yeah, I don't feel like working this out for the next half an hour. Just give me the formula. I know how to get there. I just don't want to do the effort of actually solving this puzzle. Now granted, that was kind of also for this stream because I thought it wasn't entertaining, and honestly I also didn't really feel like doing it. But yeah, so I think I made my point clear there. The graphics looked amazing. The music is kind of an interesting one. It's mostly silence, and I don't think that's necessarily bad. It fitted the atmosphere very well. They also could like increase certain kind of sounds and dissonant things when the creatures came close. So that was cool. They had kind of a motif, so it's definitely memorable in some ways. Maybe a little bit more of casual music would have been nice. And also just a little bit now that I think about it, it would also be nice if they give you a little bit more of a break sometimes. They did sometimes, but it was very short-lived. So let's see what's left to analyze. What did I think of the story overall? I think the story is pretty interesting, actually. The story is very interesting. It's definitely a very different picture than we have of the moon, of course, because we know what the moon is like. We've been there, and there's no life there. But I mean, maybe there was. You don't know. And yeah, it just paints this completely different picture of the moon. It also goes a lot deeper with the whole canal story, and then in the end also, which is kind of good, the explanation why those type A beings were attacking, being quote unquote hostile. It's because their mom was being quote unquote captured and died. You know, with a lot of stories in the end, some people really like a good feel good kind of thing. Other people don't mind anything else. I think a lot of horror endings also tend to end with like a negative outcome for the main person. A lot of times, not always. But I think this was kind of fitting. I recently read with like endings of stories that, well, you could have said that he knew he was getting into a place where he was probably going to die. But there is such a thing as, I don't remember the name, but it's like, you know the outcome, but yet you're so attracted to the mystery and wanting to know what's going on that you can't help yourself but go there anyways. And I feel that's kind of the same thing what happened here. Because you're the main character, well, it's pretty clear that he was going into a place where he was probably not gonna get out alive. And it's also in some way all the crew members are together now in, you know, some kind of spiritual slash yeah, I would say just the idea of them all being dead together is kind of a closure. So I think the story was actually pretty decent. I like the overall snippets of the different story parts. So you had like the files that you read, the diaries, you had certain movies or clips and voice notes. I like that. That was good. They gave you some pause from the actual horror and just focus on, hey, what's actually going on. So I generally like that. I think the biggest gripe I have, or the biggest downside I have with the game is gameplay related, and that is that you have a huge part in the game where there's a maze, it's dark, your device can only do one thing at the same time, so you can only watch around in the darkness, or you can discover the enemies. Having to do kind of like really big puzzles in the meantime, having to find really obscure things within the whole maze, it was just way too much to me, or too much. They should have toned it down a lot, in my opinion. Yeah, you know, the device was pretty cool. I like being able to just, every new function was kind of cool, but also the fingerprint function was basically you use it twice or 3 times or something, and then you used it one time for the puzzle, and then you basically never used it again. It's kind of a waste. They could have incorporated more. They could have, per module, they could have incorporated more. I never actually tried to shoot one of those entities with the electricity, but that's also because you can only use one function. So if you want to know where the enemy is, you have to use the security function so you know where they are. And you're not going to try to shoot an invisible creature either, because you're probably going to miss, and then what? So maybe a way that they could have incorporated like all three at the same time, so it wouldn't, at least like let the lamp stay on if you want to, so that you can like walk around without having to pull up the device. That would help already. But yeah, I think that's my biggest thing. I mean, in terms of horror and scariness, first part was, I would say, in terms of scariness, it was like 6. It was like, yeah, okay. And then for me, it really ramped up in part 2. It got to an 8 to a 9 in terms of how scared I was playing it. I was not feeling comfortable. Okay, let's go to an overall score. I think since there were a lot of good things about it. I also really, by one last thing, really liked the creature. It was genuinely scary. The sound design for those creatures were really good. Like the wailing and the footsteps and I think that was really well done. But yeah, let's go to the number I would give it. I because of the gameplay aspect and the second half of the game, or the second part of the game being a really big part, even bigger than the first, I feel. And it relying so much on it being a maze and juggling all those different things. I do notice that impacted my enjoyment of playing it. I wanted to get puzzles over with. I didn't want to go and search everywhere just to get some hints of it. And that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have to feel like you want to skip a certain part of the game. I feel like that's could be a me thing, could be that I just don't like puzzles, and generally I'm not really a puzzle guy, but you know, in this game I would be willing to do the puzzles if they were just, I feel like if they really put the terror up, like the horror up, then the puzzles should go a little bit easier. And then when the horror is down, they can make the puzzles like a bit more difficult. But keeping the puzzles very difficult and the maze very difficult and the creatures very difficult at the same time, it's not it. So for me, I would say I lean towards a 7.5. I would say a 7.5 for me. 7.5. I think that's a good one. If they improve the gameplay there, but I think they would have to restructure the entire game. It's not possible. But an improvement there would definitely help a lot. Maybe get it to an 8, because there are so many things that I did like about it. But yeah, I think that's it. And yeah, I hope if anyone watched this, they enjoyed it. And if you're gonna play this yourself, I hope you have fun. And for now, this playthrough has ended.